This is Michael from Blue Sky Bio. I'd like to welcome everybody who's joining us tonight for today's webinar presentation. You should be able to hear me through your computer speakers, and you could ask questions or communicate with me in the chat box on the right side of this screen. If you're there and you hear me, please note. The point of today's webinar is to discuss different tips, advanced functionality, and new functionality in the Blue Sky Plan software. The goal is that an hour from now, when the presentation is over, you should be able to use Blue Sky Plan better and more comfortably than you're able to use it now. If you have any questions during the webinar, if you'd like me to repeat anything or explain anything again, or if you'd like me to focus on anything in particular, then please indicate it in the question in the QA box, and I'd be happy to address that. It is a more interactive webinar than other webinar presentations, so please feel free to communicate. We're going to start off by going through the process of loading DICOM images. We're not going to focus on the fundamentals as much as discussing different things along the process that can make the process easier. First of all, if you've recently upgraded to a more recent build of Blue Sky Plan, you're able to click directly on any DICOM image within a particular folder, and it will bring up the software and start loading the DICOM dataset. Okay, you can do that from a point where the software is closed or off. You double click on the DICOM, and the DICOM dataset starts loading into the software. I'm actually going to cancel this now and go through the standard way of loading DICOMs by going to File, New Project. And for those of you who may not be aware, we have buttons going across the top that are shortcuts to different locations on your computer, including your CD drive. I'm going to hit the desktop here. And Blue Sky Plan is able to load DICOM images. It's able to load uncompressed DICOM images. It's able to load compressed single DICOM images. And it's also able to load a zipped folder that contains DICOM images. There's no reason to unzip it. You can just select it as I have it now and go ahead and press the OK button. The software starts processing and loads the DICOM dataset. Now, the first thing that we have on the screen here is it shows any series of DICOMs that are found on the left-hand side. If it could search a disk, it could search a folder, and it will go down the hierarchy tree. And any series of DICOMs that it finds, it will show on the left-hand side. You're able to select the relevant series and press the OK button. Now, one thing that's important that we have here is the quality of loading. Generally, it's a good idea to put on maximum quality. If you have a problem and your computer can't handle it, then you could go down to medium or to low quality of loading DICOM images. Being that today DICOM images are such high resolution images, and it could be a quarter or so of a millimeter. So if you go down to a lower quality, the software will automatically compensate for it. Generally in the software, we see things that are 1 millimeter apart, and you won't have any problem with it. So after you have your quality selected as you like, you go ahead and press the OK button. Now on the screen that comes up here, we have a couple different options. The blue circles that you probably notice, you're able to use to realign the patient. If the patient wasn't scanned facing forward or facing to the side, you're able to reposition the patient and do that directly from here. Another important element of the screen is you're able to grab any of the margins or borders and drag them inwards to select the relevant field of view. Now this is helpful for a couple of reasons. First of all, it reduces the processing power required by the computer because you're dealing with a smaller area. And also you want to maximize the relevant area to take up the majority of the screen or the majority of the particular view that you have. So it's a good idea to keep the occlusion in there. You can decide what's relevant for the particular case, and you could go ahead in any view, grab any of these borders and drag them inwards. Once you have the settings set up, you press the OK button, and the software loads it. Okay, in general, we recommend that the patient is scanned with the mouth open, even if it's ever so slightly, and you'll see why in a few minutes. Once the mouth is opened, we're able to do different manipulations, particularly in the 3D view. We're able to isolate and to separate different things, and it's a good idea to have the mouth open, even if it's just slightly, to have a slight gap there. Now, once the patient is in the software, the first thing that we generally want to do is to draw the panoramic curve. The panoramic curve is in our axial view, and we have two different ways of going about aligning the panoramic curve. First of all, we could take the curve that exists there and align it to a more appropriate position. The pink square that's in the middle will grab the entire curve and move it as one unit. We could do some placement, and then we could grab any of the squares that we have along the curve and drag them and reposition them. Now, the panoramic curve is going to dictate how the panoramic view in the bottom right looks, and it's also going to affect our cross-section images as we run along the curve. So it's important to have the curve there as well. Now, a useful point of information is that when you're trying to identify the nerves in the panoramic view, if you don't see them so clearly, you can actually use the squares and drag the squares to help identify and accentuate the nerve. So that's a good tip in terms of drawing the nerve. Now, the second way that we mentioned we're able to draw the panoramic curve is in the horizontal toolbar. We could go over to the Draw a Dental Curve button and just place dots along the arch. The software connects the dots and draws the panoramic curve. Now, when we finish using the functionality, we want to press the same button again, and this is important to remember with a lot of the functionality within Blue Sky Plan. You press it once to turn it off, to turn it on, and you press it again to turn it off. Okay, once you press the button again, it turns off the functionality, and we have our curve set up here. If you grab the circles on the inner or the outer curve, essentially what you're doing is you're changing your field of view. You're changing, number one, your range of motion for the panoramic curve, that as you go through the slices and you see the curve move, it will move between the inner and the outer curves. And it also changes our composite panoramic view, that the composite view will show us everything between the inner and the outer curve. We're now not looking at any individual slice, we're looking at a composite image of all the slices between the inner and the outer curve. We could once again change the thickness of that range just by grabbing the circles and moving them in the desired direction. We can also see how it affects our tangential view. It affects the thickness, the width of our tangential view as well. We could again press the composite panoramic button, and that turns off the composite functionality. And now we're back to our individual slice mode. You're able to use your mouse to control the different views, as well as the buttons that we have in the horizontal toolbar. Usually it's easier to use your mouse, and the right mouse button, for example, could be used to zoom in and zoom out. If you hold the mouse button down and move the mouse backwards or forwards, you zoom in or zoom out accordingly. The wheel of your mouse, if you roll the wheel of your mouse, you're going through the different slices. And if you hold down the wheel of your mouse as if it was a button, you're able to grab and drag the image to the desired location. Your left mouse button, wherever you click, the cross lines jump to that location. The cross lines, of course, correspond to what we're viewing in our other views, and the other views adjust themselves accordingly. Now, one of the questions that I get a lot is, number one, how do I make the lines disappear? They're in my way. How do I make them disappear? So if you look in the horizontal toolbar, there are two sets of 4 icons, and they seem to be quite similar. The difference is that the first set is for adding different things, adding the implant, adding the nerve, adding the tooth, and creating your panoramic curve. And the second set is for hiding different things, the implants, the nerves, the teeth, and the curve. It doesn't delete anything, rather it just hides them temporarily. So to temporarily hide the different lines and curves that we have, if we click the button, then they disappear. Click it again, it comes back. Another question I have is somebody might be missing one of the lines because they might have turned it off by accident. So the way to turn it back on is we could do it in the 2D or in the 3D view. We just go to View, 2D, and here we could select the different curves or indicators that we want visible or not visible as well. And that could be done in the 2D or 3D views. Now, just a word about the layout of the screen that we have. With the layout that we're looking at now with the 5 different boxes, our panoramic, tangential, axial, cross sections, and 3D is the default layout that you get when you open up the software. We have several different layouts that are built in that you could choose from the drop-down menu right up here. One, for example, you can enlarge it to maximize the 3D view. You could switch to tabs where everything is maximized and you have the tabs going across the bottom. And you could switch to your relevant view. And you could choose whatever you like. You're also able to grab any of the margins between the different views to change the size of a particular view as well. Now, whatever settings you have when you close the software will automatically remember those settings. When you open up the software next time around, it will open up with the same settings. So you could customize the view, the look, however you like, and the software will remember it for next time. Okay. What we have on the right side of the screen is our different panels. You could think of the panel as a miniature control panel that deals with a particular type of functionality. There are different ways, there are 2 different ways that you could open a panel. One is you could go down here and this lists all the different panels. You could select the desired one and open it that way. A different way of opening it that I find to be more intuitive is just by double-clicking. Whatever you double-click on, the relevant panel will open. If you double-click on the anatomy, you'll get the surfaces panel. If you double-click on the implant, you get the implant panel. Virtual teeth, the virtual teeth panel, etc. So whatever you double-click on, the relevant panel will open. Now the panels can also be closed by clicking on the X in the top right. We'll close the relevant panel. Once the panels open, you see them listed on the right-hand side, and you could flip through them. One of the new panels that we have in our recent build is a parts panel, and we'll get to that a bit later. It shows the relevant implants, drills, metal cylinders, and drill stops for the case that you treatment planned. Now our surfaces panel, what we see now on the right side, allows us to control our different surfaces. The top box, which we'll see soon, will contain anything that we import into the Blue Sky plan. If it's an STL file or something that a different surface that we generated and created. And then density surfaces are our CT surfaces, our DICOM surfaces. Okay, so we'll take a look at some functionality that we could do now with our CT surfaces. First of all, if you're going to make any changes or modifications to it, it's a good idea to duplicate it. You can do that here by pressing the duplicate button. Whatever is highlighted in blue is what's active. So anything, any commands or anything that you do will affect the surface that's active. Whatever has a check in the visible box is visible on the screen. So we could go ahead and change this, for example, to mandible. And one of the buttons I like most in the software is our isolate button that we have here. When you press the isolate button, you can then left click on any parts of the CT scan, and the software isolates it. Okay? Now again, we haven't actually changed the actual CT scan, we just changed the visualization of it. So we have the original, which is still here, and we have the mandible, which is now visible as well. We could go ahead and duplicate it again. And repeat the process for the top jaw. We could go ahead and change some of the coloring here. Okay, and now we have our 2 jaws that are separate. We could go ahead and toggle them on and off, and it's just a good way and a different way to visualize things. We also have the cut functionality. The cut functionality allows us to draw a circle or a lasso around whatever we want to remove. And the software will go ahead and remove it. Now, what I just did here is a common mistake. You need to make sure that you have selected and active the correct surface, and the same surface should be visible. Let's go ahead and do that cut again. Okay, and the software goes ahead and cuts the CT scan. There's different functionality that we have with our surfaces and different viewing options that we have here as well. One of the new functionalities that we have in the software is the ability to add virtual teeth that we had for quite a while, but we've added in the ability to add virtual teeth that is just a crown or teeth with roots as well. So we could access the virtual tooth button by clicking on the Add Tooth. On the top, you could choose if you want to add a virtual tooth that's crowns only, or if you want to add the tooth with roots as well. You could go ahead and choose the size from the bottom, small, medium, and large. You click on the relevant tooth, press OK, and similar to the way that you place an implant, you left-click where you want to place the virtual tooth. Double-clicking on a virtual tooth, just like an implant, will center it in all the views and make it active. You could go ahead and fine-tune the placement of the tooth. And do that. Now, once you have the tooth placed, you have two circles, two nodes that show up in your 2D and 3D views. The circles could be used to change the shape, both the length and the width of the tooth. And we could also change the placement or angle of it in any view. Okay, when you right-click on the virtual tooth, it opens up a drop-down menu. You're able to lock it. You're able to show the properties of the particular tooth, align new implant or align existing implant, remove it or replace it. We're going to choose the Align New Implant button. That's also accessible from the panel on the right-hand side that we have here. And here we could choose the relevant implant that we want to add. We need to select the correct jaw type, the correct implant, and we could add it to the software. Now you can see that the software has automatically placed the implant based on the virtual tooth that we placed. You also have the ability to align an existing implant, which is very similar, but instead of placing a new implant, you could point to the implant that's already on the screen, and the software will align the existing implant to the virtual tooth. If we uncheck the checkbox here, then we're temporarily hiding the virtual tooth. It's still there, but it's hidden. The view that we have on the top right is our tangential view. The tangential view shows us 360 degrees around a particular implant or particular anatomy. As you move around the implants and use the tangential view, you can see the green line in the axial view moves accordingly, showing us the angle at which we're viewing the tangential view. Another way of controlling the view is just by actually grabbing the green line and rotating it. Now I rotated the implant a little bit out of place here because I wanted to show in the cross-section slice how we actually have the implant with two different shades of coloring. Let's try to make this a little bit more obvious. Okay, here we go. And the reason for this is, on one hand, we want to show the implant and the entire positioning of the implant. On the other hand, we want to demonstrate what part of the implant actually exists on the specific 1mm slice. So the way that we do that is that we have the two different coloring shadings of the implant. The brighter color is the part of the implant that's visible on the 1mm particular slice that we're looking at. And the rest of the implant that's more faded out is there to show us the positioning of the implant, but the fading of it shows us that it doesn't actually exist on the particular 1mm slice. So that's an important distinction when treatment planning and planning the cases out. We also have the ability to duplicate an implant. When you right-click on it, you're able to duplicate the implant. It creates a second implant in the exact same space and positioning as the first one. And then you could just grab the original implant and drag it over. The new implant that's created is created both with the same size and the same angle as the previous implant. It's a good way of creating parallel implants. We also have the ability to right-click on the implant, choose Align With, and then click on a previous implant, and the software will align the second implant to be parallel to the first implant. Okay, we're going to switch to a different case that I have open here, and we're going to discuss some functionality in terms of importing models. Into Blue Sky Plan, you're able to import STL models, optical scans, you're able to import scan appliances, you're able to import custom teeth in STL format. All this stuff could be brought in and imported into Blue Sky Plan, and we have different functionality to allow that to be done. Right now we're going to import the model. When doing so, the first thing you want to check is that in your volume rendering of the 3D view, you want to be in the surfaces view. You could think of the surfaces view being the actual or the real view, and the other renderings are just different visualizations of what actually exists in the surfaces. So when you're going to go to import the model, you want to make sure you're in the surfaces view. I like using the isolate button, again, to clean things up and to get other parts out of the way. And then to raise the density threshold. Raising the density threshold will also clean up the scan a bit. What's most important when we're doing the merge is the access to the teeth. If the case is edentulous or has a lot of scatter in it, then a scan appliance should be worn during the time of the CT scan if a surgical guide is going to be made, because the merge of an STL model is more difficult to do if we don't have teeth and we don't have unique points that we can identify in both the CT scan and the optical scan of the model. Okay, so if we switched to the surfaces volume rendering, we've raised our density threshold, we've used the isolate functionality, now we're ready to go ahead and import the model. What we can also do is hide our implants temporarily they're not necessary for now. We go to File, Import STL Model. Here we have multiple models that we're going to import. So we're going to start the one that has the same missing teeth as the actual CT scan. And what we can see here is that the software's thrown it into the 3D view. We have different alignment techniques and functionalities. Generally, I recommend going to points. I'll review the other functionalities in just a minute. Going to points and pressing the align button. What the software is going to do for us now, it's going to open a window that contains both the CT scan and the optical scan of the model. One thing that we're able to do here that makes the functionality easier is we can enlarge the view. So we have both of the screens to be larger. There's no reason to work on a small screen. What we want to do now is identify at least 5 points that we could see in both scans that will help the software do the merge. You could use the same mouse functionality in these views as you could in the software to rotate, zoom in, zoom out, and to move the models around. You could turn on the point selection functionality by pressing the icon that we have up here. Another way of doing it that I find to be more convenient is pressing the shift button on the keyboard. So you could go ahead and manipulate and rotate and spin. When you're ready to start marking, you press the shift key on the keyboard and then left click with your mouse. Now we want at least 5 points. We want the points spread out mesial, distal, buccal, lingual. The order of the points does not matter. So we could do 1 and 1. We could do all 5 and all 5. What does matter, obviously, is to be as accurate as possible. Generally, what I like to do is to start towards the middle and then to move around 2 teeth at a time and to just mark points. Now, if you put in more than 5, that's going to help the software to do even a more accurate alignment. And generally, it's recommended. It doesn't take a long time. Mark the points. And it is important to spread them out and to distribute them. Once we have that done, we could go ahead and press the OK button. What we see in the 3D view is that the software has aligned the optical scan of the model to the CT scan of the patient. Now, the obvious question is, how do we know, how do we check that the alignment was done accurately and properly? So there are a couple of ways of doing that. First, you want to turn on the model outline. What the model outline does is it shows us in the 2D view how the model is sitting. One way to check is to go around the curve, around the arch. We want to check how the outline sits, particularly in the area of the teeth. Why? Because the teeth itself are more dense. They're less affected by the different density threshold settings. We know what's there is there and what's not is not. And we could go and run around the arch, and we could check in the cross sections and make sure that the alignment is done properly. Another way of checking is in our axial view. As we move closer and closer to the occlusion, we want to see again that the outline is tightly wrapped around the teeth. Okay, so those are two very accurate and precise ways of showing that the merge was done correctly. Another option that we have is to use our transparency setting, and we can visualize in the 3D that everything seems to be aligned and is in position. We could change the transparency of the model. We could also change the transparency of the CT scan, and we could check that the edges, the points, the cusps all seem to be lined up and done properly. Okay, so those are 3 different ways of confirming the correct importation. 1 is in the cross sections, check around the teeth. 2 is the axial view. As we get closer to the occlusion, we want to check Again, that outline's wrapped around the teeth, and 3 is visually in the 3D view. Now, if you're going to be using a surgical guide, the merge of the optical scan is probably the most crucial, or one of the most crucial elements in terms of fabricating an accurate surgical guide. So we don't want to undermine or underestimate the importance of doing that merge correctly. We're going to now import a second model. We go back to our file, import STL model. We could import now a model that has the future teeth. And in this situation, it was imported directly into the 3D view based on the importation of the previous model. If that wasn't done properly, we have a function here called align to model. And what that does is aligns one model, one STL file to another STL file based on their spatial relationship to each other in a different software or in Blue Sky Plan. You could go ahead and click on it, choose which second model you want to align it to, and go ahead and align it. This is also could be done if you have crowns that were planned in a different software together with the model. When you import the model, then you go ahead and import the custom teeth or the custom abutment. It will import it into Blue Sky Plan with the same spatial relationship. You don't need to go one by one and do it. You could go ahead and import it using the line to model functionality. We also have the button here, adjust model position manually. What this does, you can see in the 3D view, is it opens a widget that allows us to manually grab or drag or rotate, very similar to the widget that we have for the implant. You can go ahead and fine tune the placement of the model. Now, one thing that's interesting here is that you can notice the arrows are all double arrows. There's a big arrow and a small arrow. The big arrow is more self-explanatory. You use the arrow and you could go ahead and drag and move, manipulate the model. The point of the second arrow is as follows. Right now, the axis of rotation, if we're rotating the model, is the middle. And we could see that in the 2D views as well. We could see here the bullseye shows us the axis of rotation. However, if you have one side of the mouth that's properly aligned and you go ahead and rotate it around the middle, then you're going to lose the proper alignment that you have on one side of the mouth. However, if you use the small arrows, you're able to change the axis, the location of the axis of rotation. We're not moving the model now, we're just moving the rotation point. And then when you go ahead and rotate, instead of rotating around the middle, we're rotating around our new point of rotation, our new axis of rotation. Okay, so that's the distinction between the large arrows and the small arrows. The large arrows will move the model, and the small arrows will move our point of rotation. Now, our different importation options that we have here, to go through them quickly just so you're aware of what some of the functionality is. The direct option is if you have an STL file in Blue Sky Plan, you want to export it to make a change in a different software, and then you want to re-import it back in. When you import it the second time, you don't need to do the points functionality. You could just press the direct button, and we'll put it back in the same spot as it was previously, even with the changes that were made. The center option will make sure the model is put into the center of the screen, closer to the positioning of the CT scan instead of off to the side. If you're going to be using the button for adjust model position manually, you could use the center option first. It will put the model in the center of the screen, and it's easier to go ahead and to make the manual modifications to it. The DICOM coordinates option is if you have a software that allows you to load DICOM images, treatment plan, and then save the DICOM images with the treatment plan inside. And there are some CT scanning softwares like that come with your CT scanner. Now when you export it, when you save the DICOMs from that software and you want to import the DICOMs into Blue Sky Plan, it will save the positioning of the implants from the previous software, and will help facilitate the proper treatment planning in the Blue Sky Plan software. So the DICOM coordinates remembers the positioning of the implants in a DICOM data set. Auto is similar to center in some ways. It tries to automatically do the merge. Again, it's better for as initial starting point, and I wouldn't rely on it as a final positioning or for surgical guide, but it's a good starting point either to then do points or to adjust position manually. Now, a question I get a lot is what happens if the merge isn't good? What should you do? The first thing that I would do if the merge isn't good is go back to points. I'd put in more points, distribute them better, and then redo the alignment that way. Okay, you'll probably have a much better, if you do it a little bit more carefully and put in more points, you'll have a much better and more accurate outcome. If afterwards you still feel the need to adjust the model position manually, you can go ahead and use the widget and carefully move the positioning and fine-tune that. But my first reaction is always to go to the points and to redo the points and redo the import that way. Now, the buttons that we have here for closed model, what that does is if you import a model that's not closed, such as this one, it might be an intraoral scan, and you want to close the model, you want to add a base to it. Okay, this might be necessary if you're going to be printing out the model. You want to be able to close it, you want to add a base to it in order to properly print it. So that was back in our model alignment tab. The reason it's here is because when you go ahead and import the model, it's intuitive to go ahead and to actually close the model at the same time. You could choose the thickness of the base that you want to add to it, and the software will go ahead and close it. Now, an important point is that the 0,0 of the base is going to be starting from the piece that sticks out from the model the most. So in our situation, if we added a 0 base to it or didn't extend the base at all, the base will come up to around here, to the point that's sticking out right over here. And if we add thickness to it, then it will build it up even more. So if we want, we could do that, that's fine. If you're printing the model, generally there's no reason to make the base extremely thick. And what you might want to do is go to the surfaces and use the cut functionality to just reduce or remove some of these pieces of material that are sticking out. And then you could add the base to that. Okay. If anything is unclear, if you want anything to be reviewed or anything else to particularly focused on, then please enter into the chat box, the QA box on the right-hand side. Otherwise, I'm going to continue and proceed. One question that I get sometimes, in an extreme situation, you might import, even with the points, you might import the model, and you might find it to be either completely backwards or completely upside down. Now, this generally happens in a situation where the model is scanned facing one direction and the patient is scanned completely facing the other direction. Okay, with around a 180-degree difference. Now, what I recommend in that situation is before you do the points functionality, go to adjust model position manually and just rotate it so that they're generally facing the same direction. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be close to perfect, but just generally putting it in the same overall direction will help the accuracy when you go to points. If it's upside down or if it's reversed, you just want to use the manual functionality, flip it around so that it's overall positioned, foot facing the same direction, and then go ahead and use the point functionality. Okay, let's take a look back at our implants. A few words about the implants. First of all, the implants and the abutments can all be toggled on and off by checking or unchecking any of these checkboxes. It could all be done at once by clicking the icon on the top of the column. And the implant IDs could be turned on, and they could also be changed. Okay, you could give it the tooth number. That makes the most sense, and you could have it visible on the screen that way. The brown tubes that we now see in the software, they are going to be the holes in the surgical guide. Inside these holes, the metal cylinders are going to be placed. We're not going to go into this in detail now. There's another webinar scheduled in a few weeks or a month or so that's more focused on guide fabrication functionality, but just to understand what these blue circles are, they are the holes in the printed surgical guide. The metal cylinders are going to be inserted into them. And what's important is to see that the trajectory of the implant goes through the middle of the software guide tubes, the brown tubes that we see on the screen. Okay, Blue Sky Plane cannot convert. To answer a question that just came in, Blue Sky Plane cannot convert from a CDT file to an STL file. However, I saw in the Dental Town, for example, that there is a program out there that could do it. So you could check the strings and discussion there, and I think they could be converted. Okay. Another question that comes up a lot is, why do I see exclamation marks on my implants? And if we go ahead and duplicate an implant, or if we place another implant, then we could see that there might be an exclamation mark that's showing up on the implant. The reason the exclamation mark is because we have functionality for implant validation. We could go ahead and open our implant validation panel, and here we could see the settings for it. Right now we see that the settings here indicate that the minimum distance between implants should be 1.5 millimeters. You could change that to increase it or decrease it. Between an implant and a nerve should be 2 millimeters, and the maximum angle of an implant should be 15 degrees. So the exclamation mark is showing us that there's a violation going on. And we could actually see here which implants are problematic. And we could see that the implant is too close to implant 10. Okay, so the problem is that the implants are too close together. If we go ahead and grab one and move it farther apart, once we're out of the range of the violation, then the exclamation marks disappear, showing that there's no longer a violation going on. If we're comfortable with the implant placement and we still have the exclamation marks, then what we could do is just change the settings here. The default settings are actually 3 millimeters between implants and 2 millimeters between the implant and the nerve. You could go ahead and change it, and that will also take care of the exclamation mark, particularly in a situation where you like the placement, you don't want to change the placement, but you want to get rid of the exclamation marks. We also have the ability to lock the implants. You'll see a little padlock showing up on the implant. That's when you check the lock box. And that's to make sure that when you're doing anything, if you're analyzing the case, whether you don't want to accidentally move an implant that you didn't intend to move when you're rotating the 3D or doing anything else. So that's the lock implant functionality. We also have functionality that's Save Project Locked. And what that is doing is it locks the implants, and it actually password protects it. So if you're sending somebody else a case and you want them to view the case, and you want to make sure that while they're viewing the case, they're not accidentally moving the implants either, you could save the project, and the software will ask you to enter a password. You could then enter the password, send someone else the case file, they'll be able to analyze the case, use all the functionality in the software, but they won't be able to move the implants that you trim implant. So again, that was under File Save Project Locked. Some other realm of functionality that we have in the software is that we have powerful imaging and report generation tools in the software. To the top right of every view, we have an icon that resembles a camera. When you click on it in the cross-sections view, for example, you have two options of saving the particular screenshot or save screenshot for all positions. If you go to all positions, then it will run around the arch, around the panoramic curve, and will save screenshots with 1 millimeter slice separations. Now, when you save a screenshot or do anything, it goes into your screenshot panel. You could think of it as a basket that collects all your different images. In the basket, you could change the order. You could right-click remove. You could remove all. You could save an image. You could copy to a clipboard. Another technique that you could use to add images to the basket is by pressing the drill report button. What the drill report button does is it adds to the basket some images in any slice that has an implant, trim implant, and placed on it. Okay, once you have the images, once the software puts the images into the basket, you could go ahead and use different options that we have to save, PDF, or print. Save will ask you where you want to save the images. It's recommended to put into a folder, and it will actually save each image as a separate file in that folder. The PDF and print options are more for report generation. When you click on one of those options, you have a window that comes up that allows you to customize the reports. The first thing you could do is decide on how you want the images laid out, how many images should be on a page. You could decide on what goes into the header or the footer. So when you select header or footer, you could select the font size and the font, and then decide what data you want to put into the header or the footer. You could just select the relevant information, and it automatically gets added to the header or the footer. You can also decide what information you want to put in, whether it's the patient name, scan date, anything like that. You could add the implant list. Here you have an option to indicate if the metal cylinders that are going to be used has a lip on it. This is often set by the lab, and it's important because it affects the drilling depth, which is information that shows up in the implant list. So if the lab is going to be putting in, or you're going to be putting in metal cylinders that has a 1 millimeter lip, you want to note it here so that the drilling depth is calculated properly. You also have different options regarding information that's visible on the actual image itself. If it shows the title of the image, if it shows the location of the image along the curve, and different information there. So once you have all this set, you can go ahead and press OK, and then the software will go ahead and generate the report for you. You could save it, you could print it. This is a good way of saving information and creating reports. Some new functionality that we've added recently is the parts panel. Let's go ahead and open the parts panel. Now these are parts, these are the Blue Sky Bio parts that you would use if you are actually doing this case. The parts panel is automatically populated with implants, metal cylinders, drills, and drill stops based on the implants that you treatment planned for the case. By default, the items have a check next to them. If there's more than one drill that could be used for a particular implant, for example, if the implant length dictates that either a short or a long drill could be used, then both of them will show up on the list. If the short one appears on the list, it will be checked by default, and the long one won't be checked by default, but you can go ahead and you could check or uncheck, and you could switch them around. Okay, in our situation, we only have the options for the long drill, so that's the only thing that's showing up. We also have the direct links for the drill stops. The drill stops are STL files that can be printed along with the surgical guide and will control the depth based on your particular treatment plan. And they can go ahead, the actual STL files for printing can be downloaded directly from here. All the parts that we have in the parts panel, after you've selected or unselected the relevant parts, you could go ahead and click Add Parts to Cart. It will automatically bring up the Blue Sky Bio website with the relevant parts in the cart, and you could go ahead and you could order them directly. Now, one of the reasons the parts panel is particularly important is because the metal cylinders that might be relevant for the case are automatically populated, and you're told which metal cylinders, which drills, and which drill stops could or should be used. The information doesn't have to be manually entered. You don't have to choose it yourself from the Blue Sky Bio website. The information and the stuff is done directly for you. Another functionality that we've added to the software recently is we've built in screen share. We used the TeamViewer application. We've put the button directly here. When you press on the button, it launches a screen share widget. If you're connecting to a lab, for example, or a scan center, or just someone else that has TeamViewer, you just need to tell them the ID. The password is hardwired in as BSP, Blue Sky Plan, BSP, and that's it. You tell them the ID, you tell them the password, and they're able to connect very quickly, very easily, and comfortably to be able to see your screen. Once you close it, you don't have to worry. Nobody's able to connect to your computer once you've closed the sharing functionality. Okay. We're going to switch to one more case in the last few minutes, or at least one more case. In the last few minutes that we have available, we're just going to demonstrate the functionality of importing the scan appliance. Now, the scan appliance should be imported. The scan appliance should exist if the case is edentulous or if the case has a lot of scatter in it that would prevent the model from being aligned properly, as we discussed earlier. Okay? In those situations, the scan appliance should be fabricated prior to the CT scan. It should have the proper markers in it, and the markers will facilitate the proper merge of the scan appliance for the accurate fabrication of the surgical guide. We import the scan appliance by going to File, Import Scan Appliance. We navigate to the proper DICOM set. The scan appliance is a DICOM set. It was scanned in the CT scanner. And we click the OK button. Okay, we select the proper DICOM series if there's more than one selected. Here, what we want to do, it's important to change the field of view. The field of view that we discussed at the beginning. When you're importing the scan appliance, it's important to minimize it to the smallest relevant field of view. Number one, it helps with the merge, not to have any extra data or extra noise. And number two, for a computer to process 2 sets of DICOM images requires a lot of the computer's resources, and we want to minimize the work for the computer. The software runs through a couple different processing stages. Meanwhile, answer some questions that we have that have come in. The drill stops are specific to the Blue Sky Bio handpiece. Okay, there are different elements and factors and considerations that will control the drilling depth and the accurate placement of the implants. Okay, when you're using the surgical guide, the elements are the length of the drill, the type of drills being used, the handpiece being used, because different handpieces have different amounts of the drill that goes into them, and of course the drill stop. We used to try to be compatible with different handpieces and to track that information, but because things are always changing with different companies, different handpieces, different drills, and different drill stops, it became almost impossible to do that, or it became impossible to do that. If we recommend buying the Blue Sky Bio handpiece. It's $285. You get the handpiece, the drill, the direct cut drill. The drills being used usually only need one drill per case. They're reusable, of course. They're $76. Using the ecosystem that we've created with the different relevant parts, we know that the parts in the system works together. Okay, you could use other drills and other handpieces, but you need to check how much of the drill is going to be going into the surgical guide, how much is going to be sticking out, and that the drill stop that you're using is going to stop it at the correct depth. So for simplicity, we recommend using our handpiece and our drill stops. If you have other ones, they could be used as well. You just have to be a little bit more careful with them. The screen that came up now in the software shows us 4 different boxes. The top left box are the markers of the CT scan of the patient. The top right box is the markers on the scan appliance. The bottom left is the actual scan appliance, and the bottom right is the merge. How do we check the merge? We have the different buttons here that allow us to toggle on and off the markers. Okay, we could see now that the gray and the red markers sit on top of each other, and when you toggle them on and off, you see that they are exactly sitting on top of each other. If we needed to do any modifications or placements, then we have the same widget that we had previously. It allows us to change things manually and rotate, or to move them, as well as change the axis of rotation. And all that can be done here. Now, in the vast majority of cases, the merge is done properly and accurately by the software. If there's noise or other disturbances, then there might be a situation where you have to help the software out. How do you help the software out? Is you mark for the software the relevant points. Okay, you would use the same functionality that we had earlier when we marked the model. You want to mark the points. You could hold down the Shift key when it's time to mark, and you would mark the relevant points for the software. Again, you want to mark as many points as you could clearly identify. You would do it both for the scan of the patient as well as the scan of the scan appliance. And that will help the software do the proper merge. Now, once you have the points marked, you shouldn't press the OK button yet. You should check to make sure you've done it properly. And how do you do that? You press the Update button. The bottom right view will update itself accordingly. You could test to make sure the markers are sitting on top of each other, just like we see now. And then we could press the OK button. Sometimes, even without marking the markers, you have the density threshold sliders underneath each view. Raising the density threshold often clears up a lot of noise. You could use that as a first resort. You could raise the density threshold, press the Update button, see if the merge is done properly. If it is, great. If it's not, then you can mark the points, see if the merge is done properly, and do it that way. Like I said, in the majority of cases, if the points are created properly in the scan appliance, the software does the merge, and you don't have any issue. You go ahead and press the OK button, and the software loads it directly in. Okay, again, my isolate button here cleans up a lot of our CT, and we have a much cleaner look here as well. Just to look quickly in our final minutes at one other case, and the reason I'm bringing it in is to show how the models could be imported and aligned based on previous positioning. So in this situation, one model was imported, and then a second model was imported based on their spatial relationship to each other, and that was done here. You can also adjust the positioning directly in the Blue Sky Plan software. And we actually have a third model as well that shows the future positioning of the teeth. Most of the functionality that was discussed here, or all of the functionality that was discussed here, is available in short, featured-focused videos on the Blue Sky Plan website. Okay, if you go to the software part of the website, 1 second, I'll bring it up. Okay, you go to the software part of the website, and here you have access to everything that's software and computer guided related. So we have our video tutorials. Each one is a few minutes long. You can watch them here. They're also on YouTube. You could watch them directly from YouTube. This is a good resource to review some of the functionality or to learn additional functionality that we have here. Some other resources available from this page is we have a list of very qualified and certified dental laboratories that are able to fabricate surgical guides, that are able to help with clinical treatment planning. They're an excellent resource. They provide generally very good service and products, and that is accessible from the Order Surgical Guide button that we have here. If you're interested in your own guide fabrication, we have information and resources available that could describe that process, either to digitally design the entire surgical guide in the software or to print the model with posts and then to fabricate your surgical guide in Office. As I mentioned earlier, we have a series of webinars still coming up. This webinar has been part of a webinar series of around 8, 9, or even 10 different presentations. We have a whole bunch more still remaining. You could see the information on the website. You can register for them and use those as a valuable resource for learning as well. If there's any questions regarding the software, we could always be contacted at plan@blueskybio.com. Also, I'm available directly at 312-423-6529. So that's an option as well. We have the Blue Sky Plan Manual, a PDF file with a lot of detail and information regarding the software that's accessible from the website. It's also accessible by going to Help, Show Help from within the software, and we'll bring up the help file. We also have free clinical support regarding any of our products, including our implants. So if you have any clinical questions regarding our products, we can get you in touch directly with a clinician easily and quickly to answer the questions that you have there. Okay. The specifications for the software regarding the computer, that's also a question that I get a lot, is that we recommend a 64-bit computer that has at least 4 GB of RAM on it, 1 GB of RAM on the video card, and something comparable to an i5 or better. Now the software, the absolute minimum specifications for the software is 3 GB of available RAM on the computer, because generally the computer uses 1 to 2 GB for just being on or any other stuff that's going on. So we recommend taking that into consideration. If you're going to be upgrading your computer or looking to get a new computer, then I'd recommend something that has, the computers have 6 GB of RAM on it. That leaves 3 for the software, 2 for the computer, and an extra 1, at least 6 GB of RAM, at least 1 GB of RAM on the video card, and something that's comparable to an i5 processor or better. So those are really the main considerations when doing that. We added the ability to answer a question that came in, we added the ability to treatment plan cases that to put in virtual teeth with roots. It helps with the visualization, it helps with seeing where the implants might go in relation to where the root was or the root would be, helps with visualization as well as demonstration purposes to the patient. You could choose whatever you prefer, just the crown or with the roots as well. A lot of our development, just to wrap up, we've already exceeded the time, but a lot of our development comes from feedback that we get from dentists or from labs. And that's something that's very valuable to us and something that we appreciate a lot. We see a lot of discussions going on in Dental Town on different boards, and we're getting different emails and phone calls. What about this? Is it possible to use Blue Sky Plan to do that? We go ahead and consider the options. We integrate and develop what we're able to better create a tool that's useful both for dentists and for dental labs. We have, to answer a question that came in, we have a version of the software, the same version of the software that works on a Mac. That's on the website as well. You can download the Windows version. You can download the Mac version. You could download the computer. You could download the software on as many computers as you like. Another question I get a lot is, do I need a separate license for each computer? And the answer to that is yes. Even though the software is free, we're obligated to know who's installing the software, where the software is installed. So you go ahead and you install the software, you request the license. Okay, if the software is not licensed, then this licensing form will come up automatically. You put in your information, you request the license, and we send you back a licensing key. The licensing key that you get back goes into the bottommost box. So the send request button, after you put your data in, the send request button should open up your default email program. Okay, so if you use Gmail, it should open up Gmail. In some situations, it will open up Outlook. If you have Outlook installed and you don't use it, it will still open up Outlook. Okay, if you see that it's opening up an email program that's not yours, then what you want to do is you want to go to copy the clipboard. When you press the button, you're not going to see anything happen. But what's happening behind the scenes is that all the data in the form is being copied to the clipboard on your computer. You open up a standard email, just like you're sending an email to a friend or associate. You choose the paste command, and you'll see that all the data from the form is showing up in your email. You send us the email at plan@blueskybio.com, and that's that. If you don't get a response, it says 2 business days, but even if you don't get a response within 1 business day, we generally try to take care of licenses as quickly as possible. Contact us, we'll get you a license, we'll get you activated, and doing it that way. Okay, I think that pretty much wraps up today's webinar. There's some stuff that we actually didn't get to, but just so you know exists, we have different measuring tools in the software that's accessible from the toolbar up here. And we also have the ability to add arrows or to add text to a particular slice. So you can add notations or you can point things out. And that can be done directly from the add text or add marker buttons. Everybody is encouraged to take a look at the upcoming webinars that we have, register for the items that you find to be interesting, use the software, play around with it. If you have any questions, again, your resources for help is the help file in the software, the featured focused video tutorials on our website or on YouTube, or by contacting Blue Sky Bio, contacting me. Be happy to answer questions or to schedule time to go over the software together. This webinar also should be recorded and up on YouTube within a few hours. So if you want to reference it or go back to it or review anything, we'll put the link on our website. You can also go into YouTube and search for it. You could search for Blue Sky Bio videos, and you'll get to a channel that contains all of our videos and all of our webinar presentations. Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for attending tonight's webinar. If you have any further questions, you can email plan@blueskybio.com or contact me. Call me at 312-423-6529. And if you haven't yet, add your information to the webinar attendance form to make sure you get your CE credit. The link to the form is on the bottom on the video screen underneath the screen in the comments or notes section. There's a link to the webinar attendance form, so make sure to put your details in there so that you get your CE credits. The CE credit should arrive via email within around a week. If you haven't received it by next Monday or Tuesday, email us, we'll check what the situation is, and we'll get you the CE credit. Thank you very much for attending, and have a very good evening.